Camera B is down today, and the reason why I use two cameras in the first place is because I'm not very good at getting these sections done in a single take. So, I don't know, I'm going to have to come up with some creative editing to avoid jump cuts, or maybe I won't. I don't know. Anyway, when I initially came up with the idea for this channel, it was inspired by an album I was listening to at the time. It was from a band that I had written off decades ago. Even the band's fan base had told me not to bother listening to anything after their second album. But I found myself loving their newest album so much that I couldn't imagine this band not writing other things I would have enjoyed over the decades. So, I went back and started listening to their entire catalog in order, and discovered there was tons of stuff that I had missed out on over the years. And it made me wonder, what other bands had I written off long ago that I might like now? It took me this long to get to this band because I was dedicating a month to each album to get a full understanding of each. While I was doing that, I started working on the other bands whose catalogs I was mostly familiar with. And after a year and a half of research, I'm finally ready to make this video. Why you might like In Flames. The formation of In Flames is pretty much the same as their entire career. Messy and full of member changes. The band had lost members, and members changed instruments before they even recorded their first album. In the beginning, it was just a three-piece consisting of Anders Evers on guitar, Johan Larsson on bass and vocals, and Jesper Stromblad on drums and keys. Anders would leave pretty early on, and this is where things started getting nuts. I mean, just look at this chart. There is no way I'm going to keep up with this. Anyway, eventually Michael Stan would be brought in to sing, who at the time was playing rhythm guitar for Dark Tranquillity, and Glenn Ljungström would join on guitars. In 1994, the band would release their first studio album, Lunar Strain. This album was more raw and primitive sounding than what the band would later become known for. And it contains a lot of elements usually found on black metal albums, but it also contains all of the ingredients for what would eventually evolve into melodic death metal. Behind Space is the perfect introduction to the band and the state of melodic death metal in 1994 as a whole. The opening riff itself summarizes the genre perfectly. This song overall is part Iron Maiden, part Venom, and a dash of Carcass's Heartwork. The song would be re-recorded later in the band's career, reflecting changes in the band's sound at the time. The song also exhibits one of the larger shortcomings of the genre at the time. All of the Gothenburg Three knew they wanted to include folksy music in their songs, but in the beginning they just tacked stuff on to the beginning or the end of the song. And in this one, it's at the end, but it's a very enjoyable melody. Contrary to Behind Space, Dreamscape tacks the folksy music onto the beginning of the song. The rest of the song has a thrashier feel to it, with multiple riffs that sounds like it's straight from an early Metallica album. Another general note, it really is amazing how much of this singing style Michael still does to this day. Most singers change so much over the decades that they don't sound anything like they did in the beginning. Even though Michael has added more to his repertoire, this style remains at his core. The Hargalaten, or the Harga song, is based on a Swedish folk song of the same name. It's an interesting story, similar to that of the Pied Piper. So, tales of musicians enchanting youths have been around for a long time. Jennike Johansson has a haunting voice that carries the majority of the song, but there is also a great David Gilmour-esque solo at the end. An Oaken Throne would be one of the few songs on the album where Anders Ewers played lead guitar. For most part, this song sounds a lot like the style of melodic death metal that would later be popularized by bands like Amon Amarth. The big standout in this song for me is that they figured out how to incorporate folk music more into the song itself. It's still a drastic change in the middle, but it doesn't feel like something completely different just tacked onto the song. While not being in my list of favorites, listening to this album certainly took me back in time. I know many In Flames fans don't even consider this to be an In Flames album, but you can still hear the ideas and concepts that would inspire what was about to come. Behind the scenes, changes were happening. Over in Dark Tranquillity, Anders Frieden had left and Michael Stan became the full-time singer. So, Anders joined In Flames as their singer. Also, Bjorn Gillette joined the band as their new drummer. And in 1996, the band would release what many would call their magnum opus, the Jester Race. Moonshield serves not only as the opener of the album, but also as our reintroduction to the band, and it does both very well. This is also the first time the band manages to fully integrate Swedish folk with metal. For the most part, Anders' vocal style is a carryover from his previous work in Dark Tranquillity, but it fits very well with Strömblad's guitar playing, which, let's face it, is the true hero on the song. Lord Hypnos harnesses that American thrash meets British heavy metal sound the band experimented with on the first album. But the big standout here is the mid-song change-up and the way they managed to bring it all back together. This song is one of the ones that have stuck with me over the years. The Jester Race is probably the most well-known song on the album, not only because it's the title track, but because of the killer opening riff. The entire song is a headbanger. This is another great workout song. When this song comes on, it supplies you with instant energy. And once Anders gets to what serves as the chorus of the song, you'll be ready to go. Goliaths Disarm Their Davids wasn't part of the original release, but I wanted to mention it here because, for me, this has become my favorite song from this era, especially with its spacey opening riff and transition following it. Why this didn't make it to the original release, I have no idea. But this song is everything I love about metal in general. It has a solid driving rhythm throughout, as well as great riffs. Not to mention some whammy bar leads towards the end of the song. Jester Race would go on to become one of the most influential metal albums in the early 21st century, and would often be involved in one of the big arguments amongst fans over which is the better early melodic death metal album, Slaughter of the Soul or the Jester Race. Feel free to argue about it down in the comments. Plus, just look at this album cover. This is what a classic, iconic metal album cover looks like. This would also be the one and only In Flames album I had listened to entirely before doing research for this video. I liked the Jester Race when it came out. It was one of the albums I purchased that year, but I just didn't keep up with the In Flames at the time. And like I said before, it was the fans of the band themselves that were telling me to not bother wasting my time. So I didn't. Those In Flames fans who told me not to bother listening to more of their works had done me a great disservice, because I missed out on one hell of a follow-up, which was 1997's Horacle. Horacle, in many ways, would be an extension of the Jester Race, in both writing and in band lineup. It would explore many of the same themes as the previous album, but it would also tighten up a lot of loose ends. And I have no idea why this album doesn't get mentioned more often. The opening riff alone makes Jotun one of the standout tracks on this album, but thankfully, it doesn't stop there. There are multiple riff changes throughout the song, including the smooth solos that only add to the overall quality of it. My one complaint is this weird voice thing Anders decides to do for the verses of the song. And get used to me complaining about Anders' vocal style, because it's going to happen a lot throughout this video.
Nobody sees.
Gyroscope is another great melodic death song in 3/4 time. There aren't many bands in this genre that still like to use this time signature anymore. These days, it's mostly the folk metal bands that descended from this sound that use it, mainly because it does lend that folksy kind of tankard swinging feeling to the song. The chorus of the song is extra folksy, and with it coming in at 3 minutes and 23 seconds, the song doesn't overstay its welcome at any point. Jester Script Transfigured uses a phaser on the guitar in the opening section, giving it that spacier feel, much like Goliaths disarm their Davids. However, it's the overall progression of the song that really does it for me. It's this style of melodic death metal that would later be perfected by bands like Insomnium. It's also an example of how this genre can meld beauty and ugliness together in a way that no other genre in metal can. World Within the Margin finds a way to sit right between black and death metal, taking the best of both worlds and merging them into one. You get the picking styles we love about melodic death with a dash of the atmosphere of black metal, and surprisingly, it works. This is a 5-minute song, and none of the sections are too long. I can't find any part of it that would benefit from one less measure. Every transition happens right where it should. don't usually mention covers in these videos, but the cover of Depeche Mode's Everything Counts is top notch. In Flames really made this feel like their own song. They nailed this one. And it's one of the better Depeche Mode covers I've ever heard. Once again, I have no idea why In Flames fans don't stand behind this album more. This is an album that any melodic death metal fan and probably most metalcore fans would love. And I personally like it more than the Jester Race. I know that's going to cause some problems.
Favorite.
1999 would mark the next big change in the band's lineup. Glenn and Johan would leave the band. Bjorn would switch from drums to guitar, and Daniel Svensson would replace Bjorn on drums. And Peter Ewers, no relation, would replace Johan on bass. This would leave Jesper as the last remaining founding member of the band. And by May of 1999, the band would release their fourth studio album, Colin. Zombie Inc. is probably the closest the band has ever come to prog metal with its complicated composition. Outside of that, this song sounds like something straight off Carcass's Heartwork album. This is one of the few songs I had heard before doing research for this video, and that's only because I saw a YouTube video of a woman doing a piano cover of the song, and it was pretty badass. If I'm able to find the video, I'll put a link to it down in the description. Coerced Coexistence is more straightforward for the most part. The part of this song that stands out the most to me would be the chorus. For the most part, this song is by the numbers. Except for Jesper's solo, that part wails. Resin is another of those classic 3/4 time melodic death metal songs. And as much as I love 3/4 time in this genre, this one doesn't seem to have the same magic as the others.
I can't dissolve this feeling of mine, but patience will unlock the doors and the maps of reasons reveal for me when the weight is on.
Even with the missing magic, there is a nice lead in the song, but nothing else really stands out to me. Space 99 is a re-record of their Behind Space from Lunar Strain. And for the most part, I'm just going to do some side-by-side comparisons to highlight the progression of the band as well as Friedrich Nordstrom's production. I personally prefer this version to that of the Lunar Strain version. Surprisingly, with all of the member changes, there wasn't that much of a change to the band's sound. And while it does contain some bangers, much of this album feels uninspired and a little stale. Something needed to change, and big changes were right around the corner. After Colony, some changes needed to be made. And in 2000, the band would make the first big change in their sound with Clayman. Clayman would keep much of the early melodic death metal tone and guitar playing, but it would also be the beginning of some big changes in Anders' vocal style. Pinball Map is a great meld of melodic death metal and pop. I think this is where the die-hard, brutal death guys began to shy away from melodic death metal. It has some great, heavy-hitting riffs and a catchy chorus, which is representative of this album as a whole. Only for the Weak is one of my favorite songs from In Flames' entire catalog. It's a great head bob with some killer riffs. My only real complaint is Anders' choice in vocals in some parts. This is the beginning of him doing this Jonathan Davis thing with his voice, which is fine if you're Jonathan Davis, but it doesn't really work well here.
I can tolerate your sadness.
But the chorus is catchy as hell. Credit where credit is due. Jesper Stromblad really knows how to write catchy stuff. Square Nothing opens with a folksy riff that takes us back to the band's roots. Except here, they managed to make the transition from the folksy elements to a metal song in a more seamless manner than before.
Quality time. We got the
The structure of the second half of the song seems more in line with power metal, giving it more of a fun feeling than a feeling of aggression. Satellites and Astronauts is one of the more unique entries in the band's early catalog. It's also one of the few where I agree with the vocal decisions made by Anders. The song has a much more bluesy feel, which oddly enough doesn't feel out of place at all. I like the way it bounces back and forth between the bluesier feel and the more metal feel. Suburban Me has this nostalgic 80s metal feel to it, similar to something that could have come from Him or the 69 Eyes. It also incorporates melodic death metal, creating one of the more accessible songs on the album. Yes, this is a very poppy version of melodic death metal, but it's really difficult to not like this song, especially if you're a fan of 80s metal and can live with harsher style vocals. To me, Clayman was a very welcome change, and I liked the direction the band was going with this album. While there are some vocal decisions I didn't agree with, there were plenty others that I enjoyed a lot. Overall, I think the band was on the right track with this one, but more changes were on the horizon. In 2002, the band would release their sixth studio album, Reroute to Remain, and this would be their most divisive album yet. The band switched from using Friedrich Nordstrom as their producer and instead went with Daniel Bergstrand, who would drastically change their sound. It would be a departure from their melodic death metal roots and focus on a more accessible sound that would break them into the American market. This is why, for the most part, the American audience that doesn't normally listen to this style of music knows the name In Flames, but has no clue who Dark Tranquillity and At the Gates are. Admittedly, even though this is a departure from their melodic death metal sound, there are still some good songs on this album. Trigger still contains many of the elements from the band's earlier melodic death metal roots, while including this new poppier, more accessible sound they have been moving towards. I think this is the point in the band's career where they realized they had a talent for writing catchy sing-along courses, and this course is a great example of that. biggest complaint with this song and much of the album is the sound of this bass guitar. This sound here is not what a bass should sound like. That sounds like my stomach when I have a case of the bubble guts. Cloud Connected was the only song I knew from this album, and only in passing. I remembered seeing the video on MTV back when they still played music, and all I really remembered was them in white clothes. This is where things get complicated for me because this album is the beginning of this trend of mediocre verses with really catchy choruses, and it's going to be coming up a lot from here on out. With that said, another great sing-along chorus, I can't deny it. Transparent uses a lot of heavier riffs than the rest of the album, especially at the beginning of the song. I would have loved to have heard this song done with better production. This song is kind of the reverse of the others, where the verses are more interesting than the choruses. Free Fall is another one of my favorites. I'm still not a fan of the vocal styling during the verses, but the riffs rock, and both the pre-chorus and the chorus really suck you in. I could see how this one would have been a fun one live. It has a lot of sing-along potential. I think this album and its sing-along stylings got the band addicted to crowd participation. It's my belief that it influenced a lot of the writing after the fact because this seems to become one of their focuses of their writing from here on out. My biggest complaint of the album is the production. I don't know what happened in the studio, but I cannot accept that this was on purpose. I've heard people that I respect in production say that this is just how things were with digital production in 2002. Well, for the most part, yes, but at the same time, Dark Tranquillity released Damage Done the same year, and that thing sounds amazing. This was also their first album to chart in the United States, peaking out at 10 on the Billboard Heatseekers, and it also peaked at 5 in both Sweden and Finland. After the success of Reroute to Remain, the band continued evolving their sound. They stuck with producer Daniel Bergström, and in an odd turn of events, In Flames took a lot of inspiration from the American metalcore bands they had inspired. In Flames would now redirect their focus towards that audience, and in 2004, the band would release their 7th studio album, Soundtrack to Your Escape. The Quiet Place instrumentally has more of an American metalcore sound, while Anders would keep up the nu metal style vocals, except this time he would mix some Chino Marino in with his Jonathan Davis. Touch of Red was an immediate reminder to me of how much I hate this bass tone. It's carried over from the last album, and I don't like this at all. But the guitar, on the other hand, has some very heavy chugging riffs. I think it might be due to the drop A sharp tuning, but I like the sound. The song also marks for me the true era of mediocre verses with great sing-along choruses. Every time I listen to this song, I find myself humming the chorus to myself hours later when washing the dishes or something. Borders and shading takes on a much different tone than the rest of the album. Anders really cranks up the Jonathan Davis for this song, and if the bass had a better tone, it could carry this song much better, but since it can't, the guitar has to carry the entire thing. By the way it's written, this could be a bass hero song, but it's not. Instead, it has some memorable guitar riffs and a decent chorus. Bottled is probably my personal favorite on the album. It's one of the few in this era where both the verse and the chorus are interesting. The verse has more of that early 2000s metalcore sound, but the chorus flips that on its head with a sing-along chorus that sounds like it could be from the late 60s. The mid-song downshift works in some extra vocal layers in the background. It also has some guitar arpeggios, slightly lower in the mix than the rhythm guitars, to give it some more atmosphere. This album angered a lot of people. It's understandable that old fans would have felt betrayed. Many of them were hoping that the band would course correct after Reroute the Remain, but it didn't matter because the band was gaining new fans at a rapid rate. This would be their first album to break into the US Billboard Top 200 and peak at 58. It would also reach number 3 in Sweden. I like this album, but I also sympathize with the fans who were with them from the beginning and felt betrayed. I can see why I was told not to listen to anything past their early stuff. I spoke about something very similar in my Paradise Lost video, and I didn't take it well when they made an abrupt change in their sound. So, I get it. I do. After Soundtrack to Your Escape, the band was riding high, and they would continue with the path they were on. And in 2006, they would release their 8th studio album, Come Clarity. They would choose to self-produce this album, which is usually a bad idea due to lack of objectivity, and in some ways, I think this album would have benefited from a producer. Come Clarity would in many ways be an extension of the last album, but in others, they sound more like a band imitating In Flames guitar riffs than In Flames themselves. Leeches is a perfect example of this mid-2000s metalcore sound from the band, from their guitar riffs to their vocal style. It's also another great example of mediocre verses with memorable sing-along choruses, and it also includes some of those In Flames sounding lead guitars that sound like another band trying to sound like In Flames, like Trivium or someone. Credit where credit is due though, Anders singing in this song is a huge improvement from the last album. Come Clarity would be the band's first real attempt at a ballad. This one is for the ladies.
Sure, if we change my perspective, I'm certain I will change today. I am certain it will change.
While the guitars use a lot of the folksy tones from their early career experiments, Anders goes full-blown Chino Moreno in this song for the verses. But once again, the chorus is the real winner here. Dampening Panties Worldwide. Crawl Through Knives sounds more like something from All That Remains than In Flames. Not to take anything away from All That Remains, and if it was just the guitars, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it, but the layering on the vocals in the chorus and the chorus itself really sealed that comparison for me. Speaking of the chorus, it's another memorable earwig that gets stuck in your head and won't leave.
It's in my hands, the sky, so bright it's burning it for me to decide. With flames will reach out.
Versus Terminus is better than any metalcore impersonation of In Flames, but still sounds like it's a metalcore band's impersonation of the band with a dash of melodic death metal. It's It's also probably my favorite song on the album. Anders' singing here is great, and the instrumental pacing throughout makes it a great high-energy workout song. I like this album. No, it's not the original In Flames style, but I think by now in their catalog, people were getting comfortable with this new sound of theirs. They seem to be really developing this sound, and Anders was slowly growing into his voice. This is the big issue with transitioning from primarily being a screamer to a singer. You are doing it in front of the world. Meanwhile, other bands get the luxury of having a singer that has already gone through their growing pains before ever even joining the band. And I commend any frontman that dares to do this in front of the world. This album would also reach 58 on the US Billboard Top 200 and hit number 1 in both Sweden and Finland.
Look at the dead outside my window. Wonder what's on their mind. Why do they run?
Okay, this is where things get a little difficult. You see, just as I started to feel like In Flames was starting to dial in their new sound, they decided to do another drastic change with their 9th studio album, A Sense of Purpose. While Disconnected does sound like a MySpace emo band from the early 2000s, it sounds like the best possible version of one. If I didn't know it was In Flames, I would think it was Stevie T doing a parody on how to be an emo band from that era. But I do have to admit that I like this song. The riffs are catchy, and as usual, the band has a knack for writing a great chorus. Alias sounds like something mixed between 30 Seconds to Mars and Taking Back Sunday. It's a far cry from the In Flames of old, and it sounds tailor-made for a more radio-friendly audience. I would say this is the most accessible music of the band's career, but I'm saving that for a later album. March to the Shore is probably the closest thing to an In Flames song on the album. It's closer to the previous 2 albums, and in my opinion, it's the best song on this album. Once again, the chorus stands out more than the verses, but there is also some pretty good guitar work on the song as well.
Falling ideals, broken seals, march to the shore. You are a killer.
Now, I try to stay as positive as I can in these videos, but this change didn't work, and it didn't work for some of the band members either, because this would be the last album for Jesper Strömblatt. Him leaving the band would mean there was no founding members left. To make things worse, In Flames had now alienated both their original fan base and their fan base they had gained over the previous 3 albums.
Remind me I'm golden, the fortress above the sun. Why don't you spend nowhere with me? Follow the river and the path of the ones that are names.
After losing Jesper, he was replaced by Niklas Englund, making Bjorn Gillette the primary songwriter. And without Jesper around to help with the writing, Bjorn now had to steer this ship on his own. And they were heading straight into rocky waters. And those rocky waters would be 2011's Sounds of a Playground Fading. Deliver Us incorporates some more synths in the song and has some heavy riffs for the verses. Once again, the chorus seems to be the most important part of the songwriting, and while the chorus is a big standout here, it's more of a hard rock chorus than anything related to metal. Well, I guess if you still include bands like Aerosmith in the metal category, then maybe you would call it metal, but I don't.
Fly into the distance, disappear for a while. I can't make sense of this, but we're here today.
Where the Dead Ships Dwell is one of the more interesting songs on the album. It's got a solid primary riff, the bass production sounds pretty good, and Anders' vocals sound good. He also uses some interesting pacing in his vocals and the verses, showing more attention to their creation than normal.
Big picture slowly fades, walls are closing in, and there I was, cursing the ground, unable to understand. I won't let
The chorus is a little kind of manufactured for emo teenagers, but overall, I do like this one.
feel I was running an endless mile. Life's got burns and I'm dying inside. All of this will turn to ash, a change for a peace of mind.
A New Dawn is by far the most inspired sounding song on the album. The guitars still have the issue of sounding like a band trying to sound like In Flames, but Anders' vocal work on the verses are solid.
A dream that you had died. I'm forever alone. I'm weak and I'm frightened. This week's about to change. Things you said to me. Believe in the things you might find.
The chorus creates this soaring atmosphere that makes you feel like you're reaching out to something greater than yourself.
And I can wait to see the sunrise again. I am what you never be. To better what I am, you want to hear lies from me.
Once you get to the second half slowdown, the song starts to come into its own. They brought in cellist Johannes Burgoyne for this section, and its build up to the finale makes this entire song worth a listen. I would even go as far as to say it's one of the best songs from their last 4 albums.
And I can wait to see the sunrise again. It's moments like this.
I tried really hard with these last 2 albums Like I said before, I gave every one of these albums a month of listening time. Each time I put either one of these on, it was a struggle to make it through. It's like, have you ever been in a relationship where the feelings just go away? That's what these albums felt like. Look, I know there are fans of these albums. I've seen your tier list videos, but I just don't get it. Maybe it's because I'm an old death metal guy, or maybe it's because these albums sound like uninspired pandering to a lowest common denominator audience. It's like billions of people eat at McDonald's, but no one will ever call it gourmet. I do like Where the Dead Ships Dwell and The New Dawn, so that's a win. After the last two albums, I was starting to get why In Flames fans were so upset. To make another food comparison, it's like going to a restaurant, ordering a steak, and getting a chicken sandwich. Now, I love chicken sandwiches, but not when I was expecting a steak. It seems like In Flames fans were ordering from the menu, but they weren't being given what they were asking for. So after almost a year of listening to In Flames albums, I found myself wanting to go back and listen to older albums, and not just the original ones, any of them. So when I finally got the 2014 Siren Charms, I had very low expectations. This was the one I had heard a lot of bad stuff about before getting into it. I'm not going to pull any punches, all right? I fucking love Everything's Gone. No, it's not old In Flames, but on its own, this song rocks. The opening riff is some good old face-smashing stuff. And while I'm not a huge fan of the vocals for the verses, the chorus gets the chef's kiss. Every time I listen to this song, I get the uncontrollable urge to make metal hands in the air. Love it. Give me more of this shit right here. With Eyes Wide Open is another one for the ladies. Anders' voice has really improved over the years, and this is a pretty song. And this song really makes me think about how good the bass sounds on this album compared to Reroute to Remain.
There's no escape, we're walking backwards. I'm on your side, but life's a selfish thing. Like broken promises.
However, it sounds more like Panic at the Disco than In Flames. But I guess that's okay because the chorus is good. When the World Explodes is another song with a killer opening riff, and it's at this point where I realize that Anders is starting to sound more like Peter Dolving from the Haunted's Revolver era.
When the world explodes, try to remember these words. Oh, when the world explodes in the darkest of nights, you're my endless fire inside.
This is a song that I would like more with some small adjustments. For example, I love the second section that includes Emilia Felt's vocals. I could listen to that voice all day.
I always known
The transition into that section works great, but the false ending at the end was unnecessary. It seems like they spent a lot of money recording that section with her, and they didn't want to waste any of it. I have mixed feelings about Rusted Nail. I feel like this is another song that could be chopped up and made better. The first 40 seconds could go away entirely. So much of this song sounds like padding, and I don't know why you would want to pad to go to 5 minutes. It's not necessary. But once the song gets going, it's good, especially the chorus, as usual.
Someone to blame, the one who drives the rusted nail, but who's left will never care, pretending.
It's another great sing-along, and I could see this one being a lot of fun live. I think my ex-wife screamed this chorus at me once. Which brings me to Monsters in the Ballroom. Look, I'm aware this might tick off the gatekeepers, but I think this is probably one of the best songs in the band's catalog. And if they hadn't gone through all these changes, this song wouldn't have happened. The opening is more thrashier than normal, and Anders' voice in the verse has this odd, almost Lane Stanley sound to it. But once again, the chorus is where In Flames shines, because this chorus makes you feel like you are floating on clouds. I also love how Anders chooses to sing the first verse, but then scream the verses after, doing his best Peter Dolving impersonation, and it works. The song is 3 minutes and 53 seconds long, and almost all of the fat has been trimmed from it. This here is what I'm talking about. If you're going to do weird kind of poppy experiments, do shit like this. Not Panic at the Disco or Falling in Reverse or some shit. Siren Charms was a pleasant surprise for me. I know this album is disliked by a lot of people, but for once, I ordered steak and got steak. Yeah, it's not the old stuff, and at this point, if you thought you were going to get old stuff from In Flames, well, then you're delusional. At this point, just give me something creative and not some derivative radio garbage designed just to get teenage girls to listen to metal. And this album did exactly that. Well, in some cases. All right, let's talk about battles. I don't know what they were trying to do with this album. I thought they were onto something with the last album, or at the very least had a few good ideas, but This thing goes for full-blown Shinedown or Breakin' Benjamin, which is fine if you listen to those bands, but I don't. I don't really have words for this one, so let's just get to the songs. Like Sand is a solid hard rock song. If you're someone who can only take small doses of the screaming and growling of modern metal, then you should like this song. It keeps the screaming to a minimal and really just uses it as an accent to build up to the chorus. And speaking of the chorus, the whole song is built up nicely around it. And for a bonus, the band has thrown in a little 311 for those fans as well. Through My Eyes is one of those songs that is very much in line with the Haunted's later Peter Dolving era. The opening guitars, once again, sound like a band inspired by In Flames, and the chorus is also right on brand. No one can ever say that In Flames doesn't know how to write catchy pop choruses. Battles goes full on Shinedown. This song sounds like something written by Jim Johnson for Shinedown to perform. When I hear this, all I can visualize is the opening sequence from something like WWE Raw from mid-2010s, right? Here's an example of what I'm talking about.
What are you waiting for? I'm here. Let's consume it all.
Actually, for the record, I think it's better than any of the Shinedown songs used in WWE. Wallflower is the most unique song on this album and my personal favorite. Immediately it opens with a Caius-like riff that slowly builds and carries us into the first verse. And by the way, I'm a huge Caius fan, so this is a compliment. Once we get to the verse, Anders chooses to use this vocal style that conveys a sense of insecurity as if it's being delivered by a lurker in the shadows, which is perfect because that's what the song is about.
I like to look at you from a distance. I like when you scream in my face. Afraid to say the right words, the right order, so they make sense.
All of this builds to a chorus that perfectly encapsulates the title of the song And once again, In Flames knocks the chorus out of the park. Now, if you put this side by side with an old In Flames song, it's not going to sound like the same band. And I'm sure the old fans hate it, but as a standalone song, I like it. All right. So I'm just going to stick with the food analogy here once again. In this case, you went to the restaurant, ordered steak, expected to get chicken like you usually do, and instead you got soup. I get it. I understand why In Flames fans told me not to bother. These fans have spent years getting unreliable releases. Every time they lower their expectations, only to have those low expectations not be met. This was also the last album with longtime bass player Peter Evers, and the first to feature drummer Joe Ricard. Remember that name. That one is going to be important later. Joe Ricard. By 2019, Bryce Paul was brought in to play bass, and they would release their 13th studio album, I the Mask. It would kind of be a move in the right direction. There would be a lot of heavy riffs, but some of the tomfoolery from Battles would linger. But something was definitely stirring in the band to write something a little heavier, because it shines through here and there. I Am Above was a bit of a surprise after listening to Battles. It has a great opening riff that sounds like something Michael Amott would have written. Anders' scream has a nice raspy tone, and in an interesting turn of events, the verses are better than the chorus. Admittedly, it has a great sing-along pattern to it, but I've never been a fan of the whiny guy vocal style. I can get on board with Sad Boys, but when you sound like you are whining, that is where I bow out. Something about whiny men that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and not in a good way. More like when you see a cockroach run across the floor and your first instinct is to step on it. Will Remember is a return back to the WWE intro style from Battles.
When the sky is clear, we will remember. Through thick and thin, we won't surrender. As the years pass, the memories still last. When the sky is clear, we will remember.
Even I have to admit that it is catchy and it does get stuck in your head. It's just not my flavor. But if you liked Battles or Sounds of a Playground Fading, you'd love this song.
We have come so far, crawled through knives and artifacts. We had a purpose and a reason behind space and time. No fixed ideals, serve your restless soul. Dedicated to all that's sacred, measuring noise and sound.
Burn is another song with a great opening riff. It seems like it was written during the same writing sessions as I Am Above, and the whiny tone is dialed back a bit, causing me to have less of a primal response to the clean singing on this song.
We're in the ruins of dreams, voices and death, dead and screams. The fragile sanctuary alone, spit me out, find another cloud. Need a revolution to find a lost evolution, waiting for the wind to turn.
It's not one I revisit often, but it certainly stands out from the rest of the album.
So burn, burn, burn. The world needs to see. With open eyes, let the flames be seen. Far and wide, burn, burn, burn. The world needs to see. So burn, burn, burn. The world needs to see.
In Flames has been playing with ballads for a few albums now, and this is their best yet. I'm a sucker for a good ballad, and even more so for a good power ballad. This is the best Anders' voice has ever sounded. This is another one for the ladies, and you could get away with putting this song on any normie playlist.
They will bring you to your knees. I tried to lead you for a while, but every time I talk to you, you're too afraid to see. Open your...
I grew up in the era of power ballads, and I'm of the opinion that a metal album should have no more than one ballad on it. That was part of the problem with 80s metal. They got carried away with the ballads taking over the album. But this is a great ballad here.
I can see the light. Stay with me, away from the darkest of nights.
Outside of I Am Above and Stay With Me, I haven't really returned much to this album. There is something about We Will Remember that works for me, but at this point, I'm not sure why. I will say, though, that the production is a move in the right direction, and Anders' singing is getting better. This album also has one of my bigger pet peeves in production in the modern metal era, and that is the overuse of vocal layering. It works great in small doses, but people are getting carried away with it, much like they were with auto-tune 10 years ago. Before I get to the next album from In Flames, I want to mention a project that formed the same year In Flames released I the Mask. This project was called The Halo Effect, and it would be solely comprised of former members of In Flames. This band would have Jesper Stromblad, one of the founders of In Flames, on lead guitar, Nicholas Engelin on rhythm guitar, Peter Evers on bass, Daniel Svensson on drums, and longtime Dark Tranquillity singer and one-time singer of In Flames, Michael Stand. Now, supergroups are commonplace in the metal world, but I don't think I've ever seen a supergroup made up exclusively of former members from one band. If you have, let me know who down in the comments section. I would really like to know. Anyway, they would release their first album, Days of the Lost, in 2022. with an expressed goal of returning to their 1990s style of melodic death metal. Shadow Minds is a great way to introduce us to this blend of Dark Tranquillity and In Flames. This isn't exactly 90s melodic death metal, it's closer to early 2000s Dark Tranquillity and Arch Enemy, but it's the version of melodic death metal that In Flames members didn't get to participate in. And if you watched my Dark Tranquillity video, you know that era is my favorite from them.
Let go of this. The embers of the dead. Bring out the fire to the combustible night. Rather have the anger extinguish the flame. The numbing chemicals to keep it at bay.
Days of the Lost, however, is exactly that old In Flames you were looking for. Jesper is back in old form. This sounds a lot like Horacle mixed with new material in 2020's engineering. With its 3-minute and 37-second runtime, it makes a great quick listen. All of the fat is trimmed, and they waste no time getting to the point.
Now I see you standing over yourself, there in the silence. I see you rot to yourself, when these are the hours. These are the days. These are the hours. These are the days.
The needless end completes the 1, 2, 3 punch of the opening songs on this album. I didn't want to do all 3 of them in order, but this album opens with their best stuff.
We are helpless, as the world demands. We pulls us into the void, our wild days.
The needless end incorporates some of the folksier riffs from melodic death metal most often associated with bands like Amorphous. But it's here to remind us that Jesper was writing stuff like this back in the early 1990s too. He just hadn't figured out how to blend it into an entire song. Well, it's been 30 years and here you go. Just what you ordered. A steak. Gateways takes a little bit to get going, but it eventually gets to where it needs to be. The first 2 verses drag on a little bit, but the second half of the song is where it's really at. The chorus is definitely the most memorable part of the song, and there is some really interesting guitar work in the middle.
Gateways to the fear among you, lifelong race to leave behind. Deep inside the violence rages to the fear within you dies. Gateways to the fear among you, lifelong race to leave.
There is one part in the song where I can't tell if it's a keyboard or sweeps arpeggios, but I'm sure someone will eventually tell me down in the comments. Last of Our Kind includes Matt Heffy as a guest vocalist, and it's some of the best works I've heard from him. To be fair, I'm not well versed in the catalog of Trivium. The song maintains a great pace throughout and even has some cool breakdowns in it. Heffy comes in towards the end of the song and gets both a screaming part and a singing part.
From the rules and the expectations to the orders that are in your head, from the first to the last of those unbound by fury. So follow me down, the last of our kind. We are the will to be the last of our kind.
This is what many of the old In Flames and Dark Tranquillity fans wanted from this band, and by the time this video comes out, they will have released a second album, and based on what I've heard so far, Jesper's writing on the new album sounds a lot like stuff from his youth. With that out of the way, it's time to address the elephant in the room. The reason why I started this project in the first place. 2023's Foregone. After I, The Mask, Chris Broderick, formerly of bands like Jag Panzer and Megadeth, had joined the band as a touring musician. And Forgone was the first album he was involved with, and I think it lit a fire under the boys. One of my close friends and someone I used to make music with had told me to give this album a try. So I did, and I fell in love with it. Mind you, I hadn't really heard anything from this band in the last 30 years, so I didn't know what to expect, but I liked what I heard. Meet Your Maker is the heaviest thing from In Flames in decades, and Anders has gone full-blown growler in this song. One listen to this song and I fell in love with it. The band has finally gotten to a point where their verses are getting the same attention as their choruses. The chorus did take a bit of getting used to because I hate this style of vocal layering, but the guitar work on this chorus really makes it stand out. Everyone involved in this song really did their part.
At the end of the masquerade, your time's up now, there's hell to pay. It's only down from here. You think you had a choice, but there's no one away.
Bleeding Out sounds more like something from the Reroute soundtrack and Clarity era, but it's a combination of all the best elements from those albums.
The darkest days, but it seems it's not enough. I'm bleeding out.
It's a great sing-along song, but once again, the vocal layering on the chorus is a little heavy-handed. But overall, I like the atmosphere created by this song. It exists in a weird, nebulous place, somewhere between heavy and soft, dark but optimistic. There is also a killer lead in this song. Check it out. After years of working on ballads, Pure Light of Mine is their first true power ballad, and it is a work of art. Now, it's no Cemetery Gates, but it's up there with some of the best power ballads of the 80s. This song does a great job at conveying the emotion contained in the lyrics, which are worth a read if you're a lyrics person.
A perfect storm in a turbulent time. I know my days are numbered. Life seems to end upright. You by my side.
Like I've said before, I'm a sucker for a good power ballad, and this one ticked all the boxes for me, which they rarely do. This one goes up there with Nobody's Fool for me, and coming from me, that's a high praise because that's one of the best power ballads of all time for me. Aside from having one of the best names on the album, a dialogue in B-flat minor is one of the most unique songs on it as well. Similar to experiments on other albums like Wallflower and Monsters in the Ballroom, the song steps away from the band's traditional style of songwriting and takes a lot of chances. This kind of writing seems to be where In Flames excels, but they too often rely on comfortable writing that they know will get the streams, and this song is the antithesis of that thinking. This isn't made for the loyalist. It's not made for the lowest common denominator, and it's not made for Spotify. On a side note, and this isn't a criticism, I just want to mention this because every time I listen to the song and it gets to this point, it makes me think of Self-Esteem from The Offspring.
There's a ghost in my head, I fight every day. And sometimes he gets his way. I'm stuck in a loop, I'm trying to feel. I'm hearing him speak, so I know that it's real.
Basically, what I'm saying is, check out The Offspring. I don't get into punk rock on this channel, but they are worth a listen. And the Transmissions opening is a perfect let's get fired up opening. And once again, the verse feels just as important as the chorus. This is another song with some great guitar work from Broderick as well. Please, let this version of the band persist for at least a few albums. The chorus, though a little heavy on the cheese, is very much a sing-along. And the line, choose your side, there are no winners, hell is overcrowded, and heaven is full of sinners, is a bar if I've ever heard one.
Choose your side, there are no winners, hell is overcrowded, and heaven's full of sinners. We got it in the transmission, nothing makes sense, and we're riding out green. We got it in the transmission, nothing makes sense, and no one is listening.
Look, I'm not going to say this is a return to In Flames of old, but it's clearly, in my humble opinion, their best album since Clayman. Anders has evolved tremendously as a singer, and Bjorn has become a better songwriter over the years. There are a lot of great songs in this album, and I could have picked more, but this is why I wanted to keep it to only 5 songs. Enjoy it while you can, though, because who knows what'll be next for these guys. Another important member in all of this is Joe Ricard. And though he didn't play drums on this, oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Tanner Wayne replaced Ricard on drums for this album. But the reason why Ricard is so important here is because he did the mix of this album. And this is one of the best mixes I have ever heard. Now, he did go a little too heavy-handed on the vocal layering, and I hope he dials that back in the future with his productions, but this guy has a great ear for the mix, and it's something that stood out the most for me on this album. Like I've said before, going through the In Flames catalog over the last year and a half is what inspired me to go back and listen to other bands that I had given up on long ago to see if they have made more music that I would enjoy. All of the greats go through slumps. They can't all be winners. I think we as fans, especially metal fans, like to get way up our own asses when it comes to critiquing the writing of bands that we expect a lot from. And metal fans in general need to take ourselves less seriously, myself included. Even when I take jabs at bands like Shinedown or talk about whiny vocals, those things are subjective. My opinion doesn't hold any more weight than yours when it comes to things you like. My only goal with this channel is to go through a band's catalog, play some small snippets of their songs, and hopefully you hear something you like and then you have something new to listen to for a bit. That's why I include songs that I don't like myself, but that I recognize as songs that may stand out to other people. And remember, keep looking for reasons why you might like metal.